Hello, my name's Justin the Clue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club.
Oh, excuse me. My name is Will Sloan. Sorry, I'm trying to do
the white guy voice.
The Richard Pryor white guy voice.
And today we're talking about Richard Pryor, a very funny man who made comedy films.
Yes, the conventional wisdom on Richard Pryor is that greatest comedian of all time and failed by Hollywood. And do we have hot takes on this episode? No, we don't. Sorry. Okay, you can stop listening now.
Yeah, and if you're a Richard Pryor fan and you want us to talk about that one specific film that you don't feel gets enough attention, sorry, turn it off.
And the reason we say that is because we did Rodney Dangerfield a few months ago, and we've been inundated. Well, not inundated. We've received multiple emails saying, why didn't you do Easy Money?
Yes.
So if you want us to talk about moving,
yes.
If you want us to talk about, sorry, we didn't watch JoJo Dancer.
No, we didn't. Listen, we don't have time. That's what it comes down to.
Certain of these movies took a lot out of me.
And the thing is, like JoJo Dancer, I see a lot of people say it's interesting, not very good though. The fact that it's, Richard Pryor directing and basically doing an autobiography. Mm-hmm. But again, we wanted to focus, I guess, on his popular stuff to see if a film could capture that raw energy.
But why Richard Pryor? Why now? I think it was that reputation, that conventional wisdom was one that we wanted to just examine to see if it was true. And also because
have we ever been surprised when we've done like a comedy actor that but their movies are genuinely funny and not bad?
Maybe in one of those big screen comedian failures episodes, there was a surprise. I don't know.
Yeah, but I would love that like a comedian that they say that like his movies aren't good, that we watch and we're like, what were people thinking? Like, these movies are great. In Rocket Man, the Canadian comedian
Harland Williams.
Oh, he's just is blown off the screen, but that's not really what happens.
But having not really, I mean, I've seen a good amount of Richard Pryor stand up, but I hadn't really done a dive into.
And let's just say, stand up, hilarious.
Yeah,
watched his most famous stand up special for this, Richard Pryor live in concert. Yeah, there's a reason that you see those clips all the time, that it was put in the Library of Congress. And
we all know the several good Richard Pryor movies. Blue Collar. I guess some people like The Wiz. No. Maybe.
I mean, I'm not a fan, but I know a lot of people love that movie.
Lady Sings the Blues.
Yeah, hit! Exclamation point. Mm-hmm. Directed by Sidney J. Lumet is also very good.
But as a way into Richard Pryor, I think it would be useful to retrace his origin story, which of course has become part of American folklore. Grew up in a bordello. His grandmother was the matriarch of the family, as well as his chief caregiver, as well as the madam, the leader of the business. His father and his uncle were pimps. His mother was a sex worker. And in the documentary we watched, Richard Pryor Omit the Logic, Michael Schultz, the director of a movie called Which Way Is Up, theorized, and I quote, "If you grow up in a bordello, you see people's very core. There are no masks. There are no facades." So, we saw, there was a clip in there of Richard Pryor talking about, in one of his stand-up shows, talking about, he met white people for the first time when they would come to the neighborhood and support the local economy. And, he had a joke. You're going to hear something hilarious, which is me imitating Richard Pryor.
All right. I'm buckling in for one of those classic Will impressions. Please don't do it, Will.
But no, I'll imitate him doing the white guy voice. Okay. Like a guy coming to his home and saying like, "Oh, hello, Sonny. Is your mother home? I'd like a blowjob." And, you can see the barrier between the public and the private self dissolves in interactions like that.
And I hopefully that, this way that he grew up won't affect him emotionally throughout his entire career.
Oh, certainly not. He's not like, any other comedian who was starved for love, traumatized in, various ways as a child.
And then becomes a self-destructive individual that can create an attachment with an audience because he can take those miseries and pain and, reform them into something that's funny and also universal, but by consequence creates a life that is just eaten away until basically nothing is left.
Revisiting the 3 stand-up movies, and by the way, he was kind of the progenitor of the theatrically released stand-up comedy.
I think he had the first one, didn't he?
Yeah, Richard Pryor Live in Concert, 1979. I mean, the audience is such an active participant in all 3 of those films. For the first half of Live in Concert, the house lights are on. You basically see the crowd for most of it. Like it starts like he comes out before the intermission is even really up, and so the audience is still filing in, and he's like making jokes, and like there's a photographer in the front row.
He's like, you don't even have camera in that film, do you?
I don't even have film in that camera.
Yeah,
and he's like taking the guy's camera, and they're, the audience, there's very little barrier between, just as the public and private selves dissolve in the bordello, there's a dissolution of any barrier between himself and his art, himself and his audience. Certainly he was very influential for, not just the ways that he would like take his pain and turn it into comedy, which now sounds like so cliche, but you compare him to
Bill Cosby.
Bill Cosby, yeah. Even Lenny Bruce.
Where there's, Richard Pryor, when he's doing it, he's speaking from himself. And like, it's not just generic kind of soft platitudes like someone like Cosby was doing and that people could enjoy. I mean, he did start that way. That's what he wanted his comedy to be early on. And then he figured out, oh no, I'm going to speak more to where I am at this point in my life, and that will create a connection.
Well, as he started doing comedy, I think he first started performing around Greenwich Village in 1963. By 1966, he's headlining in Las Vegas. And the way that he thought and the precedent for a black comedian becoming successful in a white world was, imitate Cosby. You got a suit, and you're doing jokes about your family, stuff like that. And then in the documentary, somebody recounted that, he was headlining at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, and he looked out and he saw Dean Martin staring back at him from the audience. And something about that like triggered some like nervous breakdown in him. Like, fuck, I'm not being myself. And apparently he like went crazy that night. He was like hanging off the chandelier and swearing and
a real Jerry Lewis.
Yeah, saying some real obscenities, and he got thrown out, and everyone said, "Oh, his career is over." But then from that point on, like he rebuilt from the ground up. Some of what he did in those stand-up shows, again, it's like so much comedy. It's hard to feel the impact at the first time, but the sheer amount of profanity, all the N-words, like that, just hadn't been heard. I mean, Lenny Bruce swore, but like...
I'm going to say Richard Pryor, funnier.
Yes, funnier than Lenny Bruce. But like Lenny Bruce did a whole bit about the N-word where it was like clinical almost. It was like, oh, isn't it interesting, the N-word, if you use it this way, it means something. If you use it this way. But Richard Pryor just like used it as this like punctuation, which was shocking for a lot of people. Also, the way he used his body on stage, like in live in concert, there's that incredible scene where he talks about having the heart attack.
Yeah.
Throws himself into it.
I mean, he does what, Robin Williams make a shtick too, like switching voices over and over again to create characters, and that creates humor as well.
Yeah, I mean, Robin Williams in that doc.
I mean, he also had a black guy voice. So.
Yeah, he absolutely did. Robin Williams did.
Williams did, yeah.
Oh, and to say nothing of the subject matter. I mean, talking about like racist police violence, or I mean, I'm making him sound like homework if you talk about like all the social commentary.
Well, watch that first concert film. But we're not here to talk about him as a stand-up. We're here to talk about him as a on-screen actor. Now, Will suggested to watch a movie called The Mac, and I added it to my list, and I was like, I don't think Richard Pryor is in this very much.
Well, I'm glad I watched The Mac. It's
good movie.
Yeah, it came out in 1972.
I've seen it a long time ago.
I had never seen The Mac. I know it's such a like cult movie. It is really good. Richard Pryor's not in it all that much, although when he is in it, I mean, the story is about this like pimp named Goldie who is released from prison after 5 years and wants to basically ascend to middle class via pimping. And the whole movie is about the various interconnecting power configurations, the police, the mob, capitalism itself, that sort of keep a guy like Goldie in his place. And, Richard Pryor is in a supporting role as one of Goldie's like accomplices. And he is very good when he's on screen.
Yeah, I mean, he's very good when he's in those dramatic films because he has that electricity that he brings to it, almost like a live wire. You're not sure what he's going to do.
Like Blue Collar, for instance. Like that last scene in Blue Collar between him and Harvey Keitel.
So good.
Yeah, like incredibly powerful. And, just like in the concert films, when he's doing those characters, when he's talking in all those voices, in the best way, he makes it look easy because you're not conscious of the artistry. It just looks like this is like, I mean, obviously there is a lot of artistry, but it just looks like the comedy is almost like taking him over.
Now, is there a friendship that formed between Zalman King and Richard Pryor? Because Michael Campus, who directed The Mac, would go on to direct The Passover Plot, which stars Zalman King. And then Richard Pryor would also appear with Zalman King in Some Call It Lovin'.
Yeah, which is, have you seen Some Call It Lovin'?
No.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, that was a very, very early Vinegar Syndrome release.
That's right. When they were kind of experimenting with more
That was a sub-label, I feel, that they had.
Etiquette Pictures, yeah.
And they didn't last long. Now they have a million sub-labels. It's surprising to see early on in his career that like Richard Pryor was just bouncing all over the place. He was in a 1970 World War II film, which I'm sure he does not have a major role in, even though if you look at the public domain looking cover, he is right front and center. You also have him in a film directed by Fred Williamson and
Adios Amigos.
Yep, that's right. And that you also have like him showing up in stuff like Car Wash from the previously mentioned Michael Schultz.
So by, 1972, he started to get mainstream film roles, sort of. In Lady Sings the Blues, which is, of course, the movie where Diana Ross plays Billie Holiday, he was hired to play the piano man, and he was allowed to improvise. And, of course, you let Richard Pryor improvise, he takes over the movie. So during filming, the part was expanded and expanded and expanded to the point where it went from a cameo to a supporting role, and like one of the things that the movie was marketed on. Mel Brooks wanted him to star in Blazing Saddles, which he was one of the 4 writers of, went all the way up to the board at Warner Brothers who vetoed it because by that point word was already out that Richard Pryor had a bit of a drug problem.
What? He had a drug problem? Oh, I'm learning this right here, live on the air.
So after that rejection, Pryor had a sort of personal breakdown. Once again, rebuilt his career, hired new management with the idea of, I want to be, well, as Paul Schrader said in the documentary, he wanted to be not just the biggest star, but also the blackest star, which is crucial. It's different than the sort of, for want of a better term, assimilationist thing that Bill Cosby did in his career.
Yeah, where you're non-threatening, and then it's like, oh, okay, this is, as maybe the parlance of the time would say, one of the good ones.
Right, yeah, Sidney Poitier, another example. No disrespect to Sidney Poitier. It's just a different...
we're about to disrespect Sidney Poitier in
oh, goodness.
a few minutes.
The breakout film, and there were a number of different movies like Car Wash, but the breakout film is 1976's Silver Streak.
Why didn't we watch this one? Like, I watched a trailer for this, and looks funny.
I saw Silver Streak years ago. It's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it has that famous scene where...
Yeah, Gene Wilder wears blackface.
Yeah, which, funny.
Yeah. Will says, blackface scene still stands up.
Well, it's because Richard Pryor is trying to tell him how to be black, and then, sorry, folks, watch it. Tell me that I'm wrong. But instead, we watched the second Pryor Wilder film, the number 3 movie of 1980. The number 3.
You are obsessed with this fact.
I'm obsessed with this fact because this movie made $100 million. It made almost $20 million more than Airplane did, which was number 4. I'm obsessed with this fact because
it has been forgotten.
Well, maybe somebody listening to this is going to say, I fucking love Stir Crazy. But...
Did I do what I always do with these kind of films is go to YouTube, look at the trailer, and just read the comments underneath. Does it have people going like, comedy used to be great. This is my favorite comedy film. It does indeed.
Of course.
Stir Crazy. Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor, back together again, looking very old. Richard Pryor would light himself on fire during the filming of this film.
How about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, oftentimes when people talk about Richard Pryor, it's like the pre-lighting himself on fire and then the post-lighting himself on fire.
Well,
this was right in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because to me, I don't think the dichotomy is quite that clear, just in the sense that Richard Pryor Live on the Sunset Strip, I think, is an amazing stand-up film. I think the stuff that he does about his addictions in that, some of the highest peaks of comedy.
Isn't that the one as well that they show outtakes from in the documentary that we watched?
Yeah, they filmed it over 2 nights. The first night, an unambiguous disaster.
Yeah, where he just would lose his place.
He was like, I can't do it. Sorry. But the second night was great. But yeah, Stir Crazy. So again, the number 3 movie of 1980.
What was 1 and 2?
Number 1 was The Empire Strikes Back. Maybe you've heard of it. Number 2, 9 to 5.
9 to 5.
9 to 5 was the number 2 movie of 1980.
I like 9 to 5.
Yeah. It's
9 to 5.
Just a different world, though. It's not like, Avengers, whatever. It's 9 to 5.
It's the brand of Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. Now, what is the plot of this movie, Will?
So they are 2 very, very silly men. They are.
One of them is a silly man. Gene Wilder.
I think they are both on the spectrum of being silly.
Richard Pryor in this movie mostly has like a faraway expression on his face.
Oh, yeah.
Staring off from the middle distance, would seemingly rather be anywhere else but here.
Yeah, he's the Buster Keaton to Gene Wilder's Jimmy Durante.
That is a generous reading to this movie.
Well, I mean, I'm comparing him to Buster Keaton's worst movies.
Yes.
But Gene Wilder, had I never seen like one of his good movies, I would
we'd be putting this on the like failed comedians episode.
Had I not seen The Producers or Willy Wonka, I'd be looking at Gene Wilder in this movie and saying, why was this man a star?
What else is there other than Gene Wilder? What am I? Young Frankenstein. Yeah. So the Mel Brooks ones.
Yeah. Maybe we should do a Gene Wilder episode where we watch
his directorial efforts.
We watch like The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother and Hanky Panky and all that garbage. Yeah,
he directed a bunch of films too.
I know. So in this movie, they're two very silly men. One of whom is sillier than the other.
Yes.
So I can't get over this. Like Richard Pryor's the straight man.
Yeah, he is.
For God's sake.
And Gene Wilder, he looks 100 years old in this movie.
Oh my God. Can we just digress to talk about the scene where he's on the mechanical bull?
Okay.
I wanted to say, get this old man off the bull.
So like Gene Wilder's on a mechanical bull. And like it went on for 5 minutes to the point that I like texted Will and I'm like, my God, this bull scene. Like there's no jokes in this scene. It's just Gene Wilder on a mechanical bull.
It was surreal. It was Lynchian watching this scene.
There's like fades too to them watching him.
Watching this old man on a bull.
He wasn't even that old when this movie was made.
Sure looks old. So they're again, I cannot stress this enough, very silly men.
Yes.
And they're trying to get a job, and they both dress up as big chickens. They do shenanigans like dressed as chickens, but then somebody steals their chicken costumes and robs a bank. Uh-oh. They go to prison. And, typical of the comedy of the film is like when they're in court and the judge says, I sentence you to 120 years. Both of them like mug and they're like what about
the scene where Gene Wilder comes back to his jail cell and it looks like that Richard Pryor is being sexually assaulted by the big guy there, tears running down his face?
That's some good stuff.
And he's like, please help me.
The one bit that I laughed at was when they both get up in the morning and start to piss in the same toilet together.
Hey, directed by Sidney Poitier.
Sidney Poitier directed this film.
Sidney Poitier did do some better movies before this, too.
Yeah.
Like, I really like Buck and Preacher.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell's happening here.
Well, listen, I think what we need to get at is why was this movie so huge in 1980? Because it can't be denied. $100 million when almost nothing made $100 million.
And this is not a movie, like, in the last 10 years where people are like, you should watch Stir Crazy.
Correct me if I'm wrong, folks. Maybe
we're not in touch with the common man.
You know what I'm worried about? People are going to just Google, they're going to search in their iTunes.
Richard Pryor or Stir Crazy.
And they're going to say, boy, I love Stir Crazy. Ooh, a podcast about Stir Crazy. And then we're going to get 21-star iTunes reviews because of this. All the Stir Crazy bros out there who are going to...
Listen, this is a vulgar tourist masterpiece. You guys don't get it. I mean, could you make a case for this? And I know you're going to go, ugh. Like, my God. I could not believe at the lack of jokes in this movie.
Well, they're just making faces.
Yeah, making faces.
That's all it is. Like a very typical scene is when they go into the prison and they're walking through the prison hall and the sound is really echoey and the cinematography is really flat. And Richard Pryor says something like, oh, we got to be bad. We got to be bad here because they're going to kick our asses. We got to be bad. So he starts like walking really bad. And then Gene Wilder starts walking really bad. And the joke is, oh, isn't it funny? These two like silly boys, one of whom is Gene Wilder, one of whom isn't even black. They're being bad in prison. That's the joke. That's the joke.
I cannot believe that there were 2 more Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor movies after this.
Which were apparently a lot worse than this.
Yeah.
We should have watched those.
See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and Another You.
Well, Another You is like...
a forgotten film.
It's almost like a snuff film. It's like you've got Richard Pryor with MS just desperately trying to get through the movie. But getting back to Stir Crazy, because I want to have empathy for this movie and the people who loved it. In the documentary, somebody proposes that they kind of together created, well, they didn't create because there was already Salt and Pepper before this, but they popularized the idea of the interracial buddy comedy.
Yeah. Would we have our much loved Rush Hour, if not for the okay.
or Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
Lethal Weapon. Any of those movies. I'm sure there are others.
Yeah.
And
Shanghai Noon.
Maybe we wouldn't. For audiences in 1980, there was something about this pairing of Richard Pryor on the one hand and, nerdy, old-looking Gene Wilder that was electric. There was a tension there, protons hitting electrons that for them was dynamic. And I don't feel it now because Richard Pryor is so checked out in this movie.
Oh, he completely checked out.
And Gene Wilder a little bit too much.
Now, I threatened to watch The Toy, which we didn't do, every time I look at it, I'm like, Richard Donner directed The Toy? Jackie Gleason hires Richard Pryor to be his son's toy for a week.
Yeah, I mean, you could do your university essay about that.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of a Richard Donner movie, we watched a Walter Hill movie.
Oh, right. The Long Riders, right?
Nope. 1985's Brewster's Millions.
Oh.
So this movie, okay, the plot, I'm sure many of you know the plot. It's Brewster's Millions.
It was made like 8 times based on the novel.
Richard Pryor is a failing minor league baseball player with his good friend John Candy, who also doesn't have a lot to do. Whatever you say about this movie, at least Richard Pryor gets to star in it.
Yes.
The movie rests on his shoulders, and his shoulders give out from under it. But anyway, it is his movie. So both of them, they get kicked out of their ball team. They have no prospects. But what's this? Richard Pryor had a great uncle who has no other heirs. And so he promises to give his $300 million fortune to him only if he can spend $30 million in 30 days, leaving no assets at the end of it.
Yes.
So he can't own anything
and every money he spends, he needs a receipt for.
That's right.
Or else it doesn't count.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I will remember the most about this movie is that when it ends, screen fades to black, credits roll up, as if Walter Hill's like, we're out of here. We're done. We told our story.
Who needs a denouement?
Nope, nothing like that. Mm-hmm. Did you laugh during this movie?
No, I don't think I laughed once.
No?
Did you laugh?
I found it amusing. I mean, after Stir Crazy, this was like a cool glass of water.
Yeah, I liked it better than Stir Crazy.
Yeah,
because I didn't have to look at Gene Wilder.
And John Candy was there.
I'd rather see John Candy than Gene Wilder.
I mean, the big structural problem with this movie is that Richard Pryor is dealing with the situation alone.
Yeah.
If he had like John Candy in on it, but the gimmick is that Richard Pryor can't tell anyone this is happening.
Right.
So there isn't any like fun tension between friends trying to figure out a situation.
There's also not a lot of tension there is belatedly introduced and not really often referred to a situation where like if he doesn't get the money, then the money goes to some
lawyers.
There's some wheelings and dealings in the boardroom. So, but that is not really dealt with a lot. For the most part, the movie is just Richard Pryor spending money.
Yeah.
And
a real bucket list, if you will.
And there needed to be, I think, more tension. There needed to be more obstacles thrown in his way because he basically just spends the money
and then at the
very
end,
easily.
Yeah.
And then, spoiler, he gets the $300 million at the end.
Yeah.
There are some late in the game complications at the end.
Not a lot of things that Richard Pryor needs to solve in this movie in clever ways. Like what people remember is that like he sends a stamp, a rare stamp that he buys.
Yeah.
And he voids it by using it.
But for the most part, he just hires a lot of people. And
he's not allowed to destroy anything that he buys either.
Right.
So that's the other thing. So he figures it out, I guess, throwing a lot. Like he basically I threw a lot of parties and then I used up all my money. The end.
So what do you think of the Richard Pryor quotient in this movie?
I mean, there's a lot of it. He's almost in every frame, I think.
Do you like him in the movie?
He's fine.
Yeah.
He's just panicked and like...
I mean, it's tragic though, isn't it? I mean, this is the problem with Richard Pryor's movie career because he's doing the Richard Pryor thing, but it's almost like there's no fire behind the eyes.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? Is that he doesn't get to be like Eddie Murphy, where Eddie Murphy is fiery and he's pushing up against the people that he's meeting. Like in this film, Richard Pryor, there's no push against anyone that he's facing off.
It's funny, like Eddie Murphy is such a better movie star than Richard Pryor is, but Richard Pryor is such a better stand-up than Eddie Murphy is. Like, which is not to say that Eddie Murphy didn't have talent as a stand-up. He did some funny stuff, but it's like with Eddie Murphy,
let me check out this raw stand-up special. I don't think I'll be offended in any way.
There's a funny track about gay people. I'm sure he stands against homophobia. Mm-hmm. I was thinking of the ice cream bit from Delirious.
I don't even remember that part.
Look it up. It's funny.
Okay.
And then skip past everything else in Delirious. But like he had a certain stage presence.
Yeah.
But like Eddie Murphy was a kind of like rock star comedian. Like he had the leather jacket and the skin tight leather pants and
hickory dickory duck.
Yeah, he was that kind of thing. And it was all about like that kind of like, I'm the biggest star ever. But in all of the Richard Pryor concert films, like he's exposing himself. He doesn't care about
like being cool.
He embraces looking foolish, and it's all about his failings. And the way that the audience, is a participant in those performances, like in the second one, Live on the Sunset Strip, which is after the accident, like you feel palpably the presence of the audience. Like he even emerges from the audience in the first scene. And then in the third one, Here and Now, the audience is heckling him from beginning to end, and he's having to deal with that. There's not that kind of like godlike, even though like he is a god of stand-up, the audience doesn't feel that kind of separation the way they do with a rock star. But then in movies, in so many of the movies, like it's a bit like how Eddie Murphy later in his career, like just sort of said, okay, biggest paycheck.
Yeah, family film, let me just be there.
Yeah.
No friction.
Yeah, phone it in. That's kind of what happened with Richard Pryor really early on. And
But I'm sure they both came alive in Eddie Murphy's directorial and starring film, Harlem Nights, right?
Yeah, I'm sure.
We didn't see that one. Hey, if you think there's a Richard Pryor film that we missed, you keep it
to
on
yourself.
the inside.
Keep it to yourself.
We need to discover it on our own time.
And I cannot emphasize enough,
watch a stand-up. It's still funny.
Maybe the greatest stand-up of all time.
I think, we didn't watch any other movies because we were like, we're spent, we're done, please, enough. But I'm sure a couple years down the line, we're going to be like, hey, it's a new Patreon episode, Another You. Here we go.
I actually kind of want to watch Another You now.
How do you feel about Richard Pryor in Lost Highway? Because you remember when the movie came out, people were like, look at David Lynch exploiting this man with MS.
I was looking that up. I mean, I found an old interview with David Lynch where he said,
I just like Richard Pryor, and I wanted to put him in a movie.
Yeah, and I saw David Lynch get really defensive about that, being like, how dare people project that onto it? I just think he's a great man and has lots of wisdom, and I wanted to work with him. And I think that's a little disingenuous.
Oh, you think so?
Well,
because isn't that whole scene filled with like, look at these weirdos?
Well, the whole movie is. I mean, it's like Robert Blake, or like one of the people in the movie is.
Look at Balthazar Getty. Look at him.
One of the people in the movie is the guy who shot Brandon Lee.
Yeah. Is he? I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
Oh.
So there is kind of Boulevard of Broken Dreams thing going on in that movie. Nevertheless, I mean, I think it's perhaps artistically defensible. First of all, Richard Pryor's an adult. That's what he's doing. Maybe it was good for him on some level to be in
a movie, to have something to do.
Yeah, and like you can't look at Richard Pryor and not realize that he has MS and he's not the guy that we saw in live in concert.
Crazy.
Stir. Actually, he is more energetic in Lost Highway, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, do I like seeing him in Lost Highway? No. But then maybe I think there's a bit of a challenge. There's a bit of the movie saying like, well, why shouldn't he be in this movie? Why shouldn't you look at him? And he's much harder to watch in Superman 3.
Oh, God. I mean, Superman 3 stinks. Wait. That was directed by Sidney J. Fury.
No, that was Superman 4.
Oh, right.
Superman 3 was Richard Lester.
That's right. So, as per usual, you can send us letters at the Important Cinema Club podcast at gmail.com.
Bit of a somber mood in the room right now as we have to bury Richard Pryor again.
Because we just dug him up.
The greatest stand-up of all time, for God's sake.
So, I like that you go out, like, we go out on a high. So people are like, oh, you were too hard on his film.
I was trying to go out on a high, and then you were like, what about Lost Highway? And it's like, oh, yeah.
Well, I knew letters were going to come out of people asking us about that
Lost
question.
Highway, yeah.
So I haven't seen that movie in, I think, 15 years. I haven't seen it in a long time.
It's very good.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
David Lynch.
Twitter is continually telling me.
David Lynch, he's good.
I walked all the way to Radio Shack to pick it up in a clamshelled VHS in their used section.
Wow.
$5. So our first letter is from Johannes, and he asks us, when I watched the new Mission Impossible recently, I almost felt the urge to applaud when the credits in the beginning started. My question, when and more importantly, why did big budget Hollywood decide that it is a bad idea to put credits at the beginning of movies? And do you miss them too? Be it the legendary efforts of Saul Bass, the austere white text on black screen of Ingmar Bergman, or the title cards of classic Hollywood. I enjoy them all. Leaving aside the aesthetical aspect of it, I also like to know which actors I'm going to see, who composed the music, who was DOP, and so on. I don't get the trend to put them at the end of the film. Seems like a waste of creative energy, especially when a part of the audience is already on their way out of the theater. Wait, was this a letter written by Ronald Reagan watching E.T.? Did you ever hear that story?
No, what's that story?
Where he's like, we used to put all the credits at the beginning of our movie. What's this end credit thing? When he had to sit and watch through it.
Interesting.
All the best and greetings from Europe, Johannes.
What do you think? Do you like the opening credit sequence?
Well, I know that a friend of ours, Will Perkins, used to run Art of the Title.
Yeah, also Lola Landekic, the two of them would run that site, and I love that site. It's good.
Amazing site.
Yeah.
When I'm watching them at home, for example, watching it perhaps on a computer, does my finger itch toward the skip button if I see long opening credits presented towards me? Perhaps.
I don't know. I'm actually with Johannes. I like opening credit sequences. I like the way that they can, like, for example, the Tim Burton movies, the way that certain of those movies, the opening credits are like tone setting.
Well, they're the overture of the modern movie, right? Like, let people come in, settle in place. I like it when, Tim Burton, but that's an extreme example.
Another one, Werner Herzog's Nosferatu. Do you remember the opening scene?
I don't actually like the opening Mission Impossible credits because they show you stuff that's about to happen in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, you see stuff from like the climax and things like that in those opening credits. So I was like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Don't show me that stuff. But if you like Saul Bass, that's its whole other thing. Am I happy to see my friend the Pink Panther show up during opening credits? Of course I am.
Yeah, those ones that are sort of standalone short films.
Yes. Do I want the camera to zoom through a car as the credits come up? Absolutely.
I mean, I kind of like the Woody Allen credits where you see the white on black again. It's like, oh yeah, here we are. And
we have an opening credit sequence in Impossible Horror. And I went and like shot plates for it that like everyone, it just needs to be done with intent. That's what I like about them.
With the Woody Allen ones, it's like a signature. It's like, we're back in Woody land.
And I love seeing opening credits and being like, oh, that person's in this movie or that person's in this movie. Wow, it was shot by this person? That's cool.
I like that, yeah. So I'm getting radicalized. I'm pro opening credits.
Even though that, like, when me and Peter Kaplowski watch a movie and there's like wacky opening credits, we're just happy because it's a throwback to when we were growing up in the 90s that did have all those wacky opening credit sequences.
What are some wacky opening credits you're thinking
from the 90s? Probably some like James Bond movie. I mean, James Bond is one of the ultimate opening credits, like short film things.
Right. I like those because they have theme songs.
Also, all those pretty busty women, right?
These little silhouettes of, yeah.
I like it when opening credits have an original theme song about the movie. Love it. Also, a rap at the end of a movie summing up the movie you just saw.
Yes, please.
Meg 2 does that. The Trench.
Does it?
Yeah, there's a rap at the end of the movie. And I think Deep Blue Sea also does a rap at the end of the picture.
Nice.
So bring that back. That's what I enjoy the most.
Will Smith, get on it.
Yeah. I mean,
he's not doing it. He hasn't done it in years. I sort of rap.
Wait, what was his last film that he did with Anton Fuqua? The one that went direct.
Emancipation.
Yeah, he did like a rap at the end. Emancipation.
The Pursuit of Happiness. Ali. All those movies should have had raps at the end.
Like a legal thing in his contract that he has to rap at the end, summing everything up.
Yeah,
would love it. So check out Art of the Title if you want more stuff about opening credits because they're still posting stuff on there. Oh man, they're supported by Maxon, the people who do like all the red stuff. Man, we need a supporter like that. Bring in the big money.
Wow, we can't have sponsors to answer to. We got to be proudly independent.
Oh, you mean someone who's like, do you really need to do an episode on Norman Torog?
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, we have like special guest of some comedian who has a new show opening on Freebie or something like that, guesting on the episode. But Will, what if they gave us $10,000 an episode?
Then I'd say yes.
Yeah, no contest.
Anything you want. I'll have any opinion you want. I will take back anything I've ever said for $10,000 an episode.
I just unsubscribed from a podcast that shall not be named because they were doing too many ads. And I was like, that's enough of that.
You know what I don't like? I don't like when celebrities do ads.
Oh, I hate it.
Like Conan O'Brien or someone.
What the fuck are you doing?
And look, I get it. They're only there because some company has come to them and said, hey, do a show for us.
And they have employees.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Conan O'Brien can pay those employees.
I agree.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Conan O'Brien needs a friend. You pay for your friend, Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah.
you don't be like, Blue Chew to get that boner.
Yeah. If we can do this podcast without having ads, although, again, if somebody wants to come and give us $10,000 an episode,
we'd happily do it.
Yeah. That's the starting bid, by the way. $10,000 an episode.
So I think someone said, like, they pay $50 per 1,000 listeners, which I say not enough.
No, not enough.
No.
Unless we get a lot more listeners really soon.
And then we'd be like, sometimes I listen to podcasts, like the more popular ones, and I'm like, how much do these people make?
Yeah.
Like, just based on Patreon and how much they must get from ad revenue. Like,
I mean, Jesus.
a lot.
Yeah.
Now, we should point out some of our friends that We Hate Movies, when I made a post about that, they're like, we don't make that much. We also split it between. There's a lot of people on this podcast.
That's right. There's a whole high school band class on mic there.
Yeah.
So,
and all of them need an equal split.
you know what? And hey, listen, as somebody who makes,
I can't wait for Michael and us to be like, stamps.com when you need your stamps.
we haven't done it yet.
And it's a little bit ironic too, you know.
Yeah.
We're in on it.
We're in on it, but we're still cashing in.
Yeah.
You know what I'll just say? You know, us podcast professionals, we're still making a lot less than any dentist does.
Well,
A lot less. A lot less.
I mean, we're probably making less
Fraction of what a dentist
than
makes.
anyone who still has a 9-to-5 job
Yeah,
in a bank.
like actually, that is success in the podcast realm is to just barely make
With someone in a bank or a 9-to-5
in their
job.
first year, first year at that job.
Well,
So what I'm saying is on Patreon this week, which you should subscribe to, we're talking about Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Paul Rubens in general.
I thought you were going to say we were going to talk about Norman Turog Part 2.
You know, we're lucky. We get to talk about, anything we want. By the way, patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club. Hours and hours and hours of stuff. Do we have any more letters?
Yeah, we do have letters.
Okay, well, there was your Patreon segment, and now let's have another letter.
Yeah, and then we'll shill the Patreon segment again right after, just in case you're one of those people that like, well, they're doing the order that I used. Skip to the good
I'll
stuff.
skip the letters to the ad, to the Patreon ad, my favorite segment.
Speaking of part 2, the listener Jacob actually asked, have you ever considered doing a second follow-up episode on a director beside Jess Franco, who is the only one who has gotten a part 2 in the official available Important Cinema Club lexicon?
Well, we've been talking about when we hit episode 400, we might do like a month of episodes or even 10 weeks of episodes where we revisit select topics from early in the show. Because
and Patreon is also a way that we just revisit similar topics over and over again just by focusing on a specific movie.
yeah, we've done a couple of Lucio Fulcis,
Yeah, a lot of Jackie Chan.
a lot of Jackie
A lot
Chan.
of Martin Scorsese as well.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of his movies and never done a main episode on him as a filmmaker.
We did a main episode on him as a cinephile.
Yeah, that's right.
But we would like to do eventually one where, like, for example, we did an early episode on Clint Eastwood. Like,
we could easily...
we could do another. We should get Orson
we should
Welles.
do the bad Clint Eastwood.
Oh, that would be
Like
interesting.
Bronco Billy.
Well,
and
that Bronco Billy's good.
I know. Every which way.
Well, like The Rookie,
Oh,
one of those.
yeah.
Yeah, one of the orangutan ones that would be good.
Trying to think of his other... I mean, you can just look at...
Bloodwork.
Yeah. So you pick one from each period of his career that is considered the bad one.
Paint Your Wagon.
Oh, yes.
Wouldn't that be great? We could do one from every decade.
Yeah, we'll do that. Coming up, the bad Clint Eastwood. But we could just do, I mean, I was going to say his late period, but you've covered that ad nauseum on all the podcasts that you've done. He's got another one coming out, doesn't he? His jury one?
Well, production was shut down because of the strike.
He's not going to live through it. What are you guys doing?
I know. I think everyone should be allowed to cross the picket line for Clint, and Clint alone.
Clint's like, I just need like 2 more days and then I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, that's all he needs.
He should have just like shot the whole movie.
Like when he heard SAG was like about to happen, he's like, all right, let's just finish this up.
One take every scene.
Yeah. If you guys can't do it, you're fired.
Yeah.
Get in here. I need a replacement. Woody Allen. Clint Eastwood movie. Oh, wait. John Cleese is here, too. Oh, no. Hey, wait. Did that new Roman Polanski film play already?
It's coming to the Venice Film Festival.
Oh, so it hasn't opened yet.
No, it opens in Italy at the end of September.
Oh, and this letter writer also asked if we would be up to doing an episode, and he has never come up before. Jorg Buttiger, I'm not saying his name, Necromantic guy.
Oh, Necromantic, yeah.
1 and 2, and what's the one the other? I have it I know if I see it, it's that blood red cover and like the guy's face kind of like cut in two.
So Necromantic is, if you don't know, it is one of those. I mean, if
Can you believe they made this movie?
Yeah, if you were reading like Video Hounds, Cult Flicks, and Trash
If you have
Picks,
Stephen Thrower's like eyeball, like any zine from like the 80s and 90s, Necromantic is going to come up.
and it is, as you have probably guessed, a necrophilia themed cult movie, sort of is it German? Is that
Yeah,
what it
German.
is? Yeah. I mean,
You're not even that familiar with it?
Well, I saw it once a long time
You
ago.
have both 4K releases that were put out of it, right?
I have the Arrow Blu-ray, but I don't like it very much.
Necromantic 2 is very
like...
weird. Not really.
Yeah.
But Necromantic 2, I think, is very odd and like different. Like, you got a much bigger budget, so it feels like it's like the Evil Dead 2 to the Evil Dead 1 of Necromantic.
You know what? I wouldn't say no to an episode.
That director's a huge Godzilla fan, too. He's done like a bunch of like little short films about him, too. So,
well, sounds like my kind of guy.
and I don't think, has he been directing movies since then? Like, I think there's those 4 that I know.
Is there a possible Shocktober episode in this?
Yeah.
Or do we want to waste one on him?
Well, hey, Will, we have no masters. We could be Shocktober in November if we wanted. Like,
All right, let's do that.
So
Put him on the list.
He's going on the list. Thanks for bringing him up. Yeah, again, his name was everywhere when I was like getting into cult cinema when I was a kid, but like doesn't seem to get mentioned that much anymore.
Yeah.
Like that, those were one of the VHSs you would hear like Robin Bougie talk about, like would be taken at the border and seized.
Right.
Would be one of those.
And now you can just get it at
like any Amazon will sell it to you.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's actually on Amazon through like the Arrow video release. So thank you very much for that letter. And our Patreon this week is Paul Rubens.
Paul Rubens, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Like we say, making less than a first-year person at a law firm.
Yeah.
So
become a Patreon subscriber. Thank you.
So help me get my non-existent child through college.
People have said that they really enjoy our What We've Been Watching episodes, and you can listen to the one we did last week.
Well, I'm glad. They're very easy to do.
Yes. Just riff. That's what people like.
riff.
These episodes are very heavily scripted. That's why.
Yeah. Well, not anymore because the writers are on strike.
Yeah.
So now Justin and I have had
Wait,
to...
are we using union writers on the show?
Yeah, Justin and I have now had to, for the first time ever, write our own episodes. So if the quality seems a little worse than it did before, that's why. So next week on the podcast, we're taking a sideways approach to a familiar topic.
Yeah, we're doing Johnny Toe, right?
No, but we're doing something Johnny Toe adjacent. Johnny Toe, as any self-respecting fan of Hong Kong cinema knows, is the CEO or something, the founder, the house director of Milky Way Image, a very famous Hong Kong production company. That's where he makes his triad movies as well as his romantic comedies, and a company that's one of the most famous post-1997 Hong Kong companies. And we're not going to be talking about Johnny Toe.
Well, we are, because some of the movies that we're going to be talking about that were produced by Milky Way, Johnny Toe has been like, well, I ghost directed that film, even though someone else's name is on it.
So we're going to be talking about Milky Way Image, the company, which inevitably will include some Johnny Toe discussion. But yeah, what is the company's place in the firmament of Hong Kong cinema? What are some of the other directors' films being made? Do they reflect Johnny Toe? What do they tell us about Hong Kong at the time?
So I'm going to recommend watching Motorway, which is directed by Soy Chang, the guy who made SPL2. He's like, the bad boy of Hong Kong cinema. And I will also recommend The Longest Night. That's a really good one. And I'd have to look at the list because I want like ones from different eras, because there was like a bunch that were made together, like Expect the Unexpected. Oh, Beyond Hyperthermia is a late 90s one and was directed by a guy who for a while seemed to be like the next Hong Kong director. Like he did a movie called Task Force. He was going to direct, I think, Bullet in the Head 2, which was going to be made for a while.
Sequel to the John Woo film.
Yeah, because he was a John Woo guy, and then that didn't end up happening. Then he ended up directing kind of meh. He directed The Twins Effect 2.
Oh, good God.
So that's what we'll be doing next week, Milky Way Image. And until then, my name's Justin McClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. I'd like to thank some of our new patron subscribers, who include Sam Time, Benoit Le Cenobite, Ian McNamara, Ash, Shay, Kelleher, Jordan, Sekarishia, Maurice Jones, Kenny Jones, Stephen Hefferman, Andrew Craybaum, Ben M., and Scott Turnbull. Thank you very much for becoming patron subscribers. We could not keep doing this without you.
Well, the movies are back.
Woo!
Barbie, Oppenheimer.
Yep.
The Meg 2.
Now,
you saw the Meg 2.
I did see the Meg 2. Me and my friends, we had a Megathon where we got together. We watched Meg 1, Shark Attack 3, Megadolon. I can't say that word.
Megadolon. I saw that film, Shark Attack, Megalodon.
Yeah, that's the one that has the famous line like, how about we go back to your house and I'll eat your pussy.
Yeah.
And it's a new image film we were watching. I was like, movies used to be movies. Shot on film in Bulgaria. Everyone's dubbed. Shot by the cinematographer and directed by the cinematographer of Bronco Billy, David Worth.
Wow.
And then we watched Meg 2. Now, Meg 1, I've been seeing a lot online that people are like, Meg 1, good. People said it was bad. Nah, it's good.
Well, the Meg 2 is directed by no less than Ben Wheatley.
Yeah, but we watched Meg 1, directed by no less John Turteltaub, director of Bruce Willis in The Kid.
I saw somebody joking on Twitter, I think it was Sean Glennis, say that it's like, well, this is like how the Mission Impossible movies used to be auteur movies. Turteltaub, Wheatley.
So we went into the Meg 2 a little bit. We'll do it.
Well, it had 0% on Rotten Tomatoes for a while.
Now, the Meg 2 as well is not playing anywhere in Toronto. It's playing in 3D at Yonge and Dundas. It's playing in Screen X at Scotiabank. We saw it at the Market Square Cinema because it's the only place we could see it, not in a special format.
Wow.
The opening weekend. What is going on?
Huge movie, Warner Brothers.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on in Toronto and why it's being buried like that.
What do the elites not want you to see?
Yeah. And the Meg 2, you know how many people in the audience were with us? 0. It was only us 3 in the audience for a 9:45 screening on a Saturday.
Wow. Even Adam Naiman wasn't out joining you to see the new Wheatley?
The man who wrote the book on Ben Wheatley.
Yeah.
No, he was not. And you know what? We hooted and hollered through all of it. Had a blast.
Wow. I'm glad. I'm happy to hear that.
Looking at the reviews, we were genuinely like, what did people want? Because it's super fun.
Right.
It does a thing a little Jurassic World-ish, is that it actually introduces like a bunch of different monsters as well as the Meg. There's martial arts fights in it. You know, Ben Wheatley trying to do as entertaining a sequel to the Meg as he can make.
When I hear that Ben Wheatley directed it, it's kind of like when you find out that Raul Ruiz directed a Stephen Baldwin thriller or something.
Well, I mean, Ben Wheatley has been connected to big budget pictures for the longest time. He was going to do Tomb Raider.
Yeah, Tomb Raider sequel, yeah.
And, you know, I would say that one of the things that like did make me a little bit not excited for it were the reviews, and also it's like Ben Wheatley's not really known as a fun director.
No.
So like, you know, it's interesting that he would tackle this kind of stuff, but again, we had a blast. There's tons of villains in it who were dispatched in humorous ways.
So it's also an American-Chinese co-production.
Yes.
Which you don't see as much anymore.
You didn't rush out to see the Meg 2 in theaters, Will?
No, I haven't. But I don't know. I'm kind of curious
Did you see the first Meg?
No, I didn't see the first Meg.
I don't think you'd like Meg 2.
Yeah.
I mean, we
know each other's taste pretty well at this point.
You need to watch it to be able to do your, like, in 3 months when you're like, this is the state of movies.
Oh, one of my blog pieces? Yeah.
Well, what does the Meg 2 say about... I did look at box office results, and it seems to be second or third on box office, so it's not like opening at number 9th or anything like that. I may be mistaken.
I think it's being projected for like 30 million.
Yeah, which is not great.
But the first one made over, I didn't even know the first one made
huge hit.
A lot of, especially overseas, it was massive.
Well, I guess that's all that really matters, right? Will the Meg 2 make a bunch of money in China?
Yeah.
I was surprised that there's like a little kid in the Meg, and she comes back in the second one. She has done nothing since the Meg. Same actor that they brought back. So, you know, and there's weird connections so that there's tons of references to the Meg 1. Almost like cheeky, like, you probably watched the Meg 1 before watching this movie because it would make no sense otherwise. I love that shit. I'm just eating it up.
So you heard it here first. The Meg 3.
Oh, would love it. Well, The Meg is also a famous unmade movie that it's based on a novel in the 90s, and everyone tried to direct it. For the longest time, it was going to be an Eli Roth directed movie. And they just couldn't get it off the ground, which is really funny because a period in time where Hollywood was like, do people want shark movies?
So who should make the Meg 3? Alex Ross Perry.
I bet you he would love to make the Meg 3.
Yeah.
Like, he's just waiting. Because I remember hearing an interview when, like, Winnie the Pooh or Christopher Robin came out. He's like, I received no calls after that film came out in theaters. Like, no one was like, oh, we're going to give you this job or that job. So, I wonder how Ben Wheatley got the job. Was he putting himself forward for, like...
Probably he said to some agent,
I will do anything.
He said, like, I want to make some money. Let's make some money.
Make some money. Yeah, who is, like, another mumblecore... Like, but... coming up. So it can't be like Mark Duplass's The Meg 3 or anything like that.
Yeah.
Remember when Nicholas Winding Refn, they were like, he's going to direct Wonder Woman. And you're like...
Could you imagine?
It would not be a blockbuster. No, I can't, because he doesn't have those filmmaking muscles. Mm-hmm. People are like, how dare you insult Nick like that right now?
Yeah, I don't know. For The Meg 3, maybe it could be Rick Alverson. Or,
Rick Alverson? Who's that?
He did The Comedy with Tim Heidecker. Or Amy Seimetz. Or how about Joel Petrakis? You know, Joel Petrakis Petrikis is the Meg 3.
Who's Joel Petrikis for people that don't know?
He made that film Buzzard. You remember Buzzard?
Yes. Yeah, basically all of his films are about like a disaffected 20-something being miserable and just digging himself deeper into the hole.
Yeah, or God, I don't know, Peter Vack. Let's get Peter Vack's the Meg 3.
Well, I will say that Ben Wheatley was a TV guy before he did movies. So he already had that experience as like delivering something that people expected, was in a box. He also directed a bunch of Doctor Who episodes. So it's not like you're not taking like an indie guy that knows nothing. I mean, but Hollywood always does that. Like, oh, City of Lost Children? Yeah, get this director to make Alien 4 Resurrection.
He still does, though. Ben Wheatley still does some like smaller things.
He does. Yes, he does.
Which is good. If you can keep that up.
One for them, one for me.
Yeah.
And then it'll be The Flash 2, directed by Ben Wheatley.
God, did you see Rebecca by him?
No, you brought this up last time he came up, and I watched,
of course I did.
10 minutes, and I went, no thank you.
You did the right thing.
Yeah, because it looked bad.